late. I see I'm 2 minutes late, better than last time. Elizabeth Gregory says, yay, was waiting on this. Teresa Turner said, my reminder, can't wait. Melanie waits, ready and waiting. One of our members is here, Robbie Robin, just reading through a few pages on Patreon. If you do want to follow this particular section of the affidavit, I'll put a link to the Patreon part of the affidavit, the Patreon post that deals with this part of the affidavit. I'll put that up now. Wow, Stephanie's here. Glad you could make it, Stephanie. I've actually been meaning to speak to Stephanie about Loving Vincent. That actually sounds terrible. But about a movie that I know she's been meaning to watch for quite a long time, and I'm sorry that we haven't gotten to it earlier, but it's definitely something to put on the kind of agenda. Stephanie, just a reminder in terms of, I'm sure you know this, but it's also to let everyone else know that that we are here to evaluate the affidavit. We're here to sort of look at the legal possibilities from the prosecution perspective, from the defense perspective. We're not here to play the role of the jurors or the jury. We're going to leave that to the trial, which is possibly going to be coming up next month. So we don't really want to be saying things like Barry is definitely guilty or whatever. I think you know what I'm talking about. We can talk about that, however, certain evidence, certain inferences that can be made from the evidence, and speculate based on some of the information, but we certainly don't want to make blanket statements, especially aspersions about guilt. Okay. Stephanie says, last live chat was removed from the video. I don't think it was removed. I purposefully don't let the chat play back. So even if somebody does say something, it's just like a kind of a safety thing, safety sort of issue. It is a little bit risky opening the chat up to even subscribers, but I try to cover myself by having the chat disappear once it's done. But you often in legally sensitive cases like Summer World, which is currently still legally sensitive, YouTube disables comments, and people think it's the creator that's doing that. It's just because it's legally sensitive, and I guess YouTube could get into trouble if certain statements are published without evidence, I guess. I'm not sure if really it's got to do with that. Maybe it's got to do with other issues, such as the age of some of the victims, and I mean it with a plural there. Okay, so we've got a couple of members here, Karina, Heather G, Robbie Robin. Good to see you guys. I'm not going to spend too long with the, what do they call it, the formalities, the pleasantries, because there's quite a bit to get through. So Timmy, I think, I don't think he wants to sit on my lap, he wants to play. Timmy, come boy, come. No, he doesn't want to be a prop. He feels used. He feels like he's a social media prop. Timmy, come. I need your propness. Come, boy. Can I use you? Hey? Can you see Timmy over here? He's being quite obstinate. Timmy, can you He come say hello. Looks like he's ready to make his appearance. Come to me. Okay. Let's just have a look at who's here. Crystallina Bacteria. It's good to see some folks that we haven't spoken to in a while. Angela Gallagher, hello. Cynthia Nielsen says, hi, mods and Nick and TCRS fans. Okay, so in this live stream, we're going to deal with the April 5th, 2021 interview. It's a kind of an epic interview. It goes on for about 30 pages. And something that comes up in this epic interview is a moment where Barry says something about, she brought my phone out of airplane mode that night. It's quite a big statement. He says that Suzanne brought his phone out of airplane mode that night, and it's quite a clever response that the agent gives when we get to that. So we'll be dealing with that. So if you have the affidavit in front of you, we're dealing with 30 pages from page 92 to page 122. And this is really actually the penultimate interview. It was the final big interview that Barry gave before he was arrested. So this is really the last major interview that he gave. There was a little interview he gave after this, right? Stephanie's put a link to the affidavit in the chat. So as she says, read along. It's pages 92. Heather says, listening but cooking dinner, so can't comment at the moment. That is perfectly fine. Crystallina says, hi from the UK. Cynthia Nielsen says, Nick has done the most thorough review of this affidavit of anyone. Has anyone else done a review of the affidavit? Did somebody sort of read through everything, or did anybody else kind of go through the affidavit, or did they just go through the highlights? Okay. Turning off and on the Wi-Fi. No, it was actually put onto airplane mode. Andor Warji and Lisa McGuinness, hi and welcome. Cynthia Nielsen just highlights. Kit said, I read the whole thing. That's good. And not everyone has. Sylvia Rogier. Okay. I saw a name that I thought was swearing, but it's actually the avatar's name. So, okay. Takes a little while to get used to some of these things. Charlotte D. Hi, all the way from Kentucky. Okay. Right, so we will carry on for about 1 more minute till we get to the 10-minute mark. Sylvia, is it Rogier? Bonsoir. Bonsoir, Sylvia. Are you in France? Wow, Kit says, I read the whole thing twice. So Kit, what are the biggest standouts to you? What are the biggest milestones? And Kit, do you agree that this last big interview, this one on April 5th was a big one, was a kind of important to the affidavit? Helena says hello from Los Angeles. Hi, Helena. Elizabeth Gregory says, I don't have time to sit and read it, would rather listen while I work. So thank you. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so we had 10 minutes. Let's get started. So this is from April 5th. It says part 1. Part 2, I think, is where I think someone arrives home and then they decide to go to a different location. I think it's one of the daughters arrives home or something. Anyway, so April 5th, it says, during this two-part interview, FBI agents placed 26 exhibits in front of Barry, including photos Suzanne sent to Libler, and I think that's mostly selfies. Cell phone data, so Barry's presented with these selfies that are sent to Libler. Of course, at this point, Barry officially, according to Barry, doesn't know Jeff Libler's identity and isn't really asking terribly often about him. Anyway, they show him cell phone data, they show him search photos, they show timelines of his activities on May 9th and May 10th, and they show surveillance photos. So really what this is, they're presenting Barry with a lot of evidence, including metadata, and they're kind of saying, okay, Barry, what do you think about this? What do you say about this? And in a way, it's kind of a test to see how much his previous statements are going to change, and or if they're not going to change. So it's kind of putting Barry a bit on the spot. So all of this starts at around about 25 past 10 in the morning. Special Agent Grussing and Special Agent Harris contact Barry at his residence in Poncha Springs. Barry says mentally still kind of in that just confused mode about, and he says, and I've shared this with you guys about I was one way, and then when you guys told me about the affair, just I did a 180 in my mind. I don't even know if it's a fair way for me to think sometimes. So I don't know why they've highlighted the statement from Barry where he says, I'm just confused, I'm in a confused mode. And he said, I've just done a 180 in my mind. Like, you know, he's so shocked by the affair that everything's kind of in the air kind of thing. Now, if I can speculate, I would say what Barry's kind of doing by saying that, I could be wrong, but it seems like he's giving a disclaimer. He's saying, you know what, this affair has thrown me for a loop. As a result, I've done a 180. I don't know what to think. I'm really confused. It's kind of a disclaimer to say, all this stuff you're going to show me, these exhibits, I don't want to say, don't take my word for it, but it's kind of almost like he's saying, you know, I'm just confused. So if I say something strange, I've been thrown for a loop anyway. It's almost like he's preparing preparing the soil, preparing the field for what's to come. Doesn't that, Stephanie says, or possibly to excuse his reaction? It seems like he's already issuing kind of a disclaimer, right? So one of the things that we are going to deal with now is the timeline. And that is the area where I think Barry is quite confused and where there's kind of discrepancies. There are discrepancies in the timeline throughout May 9 and 10, or questions around the timeline. And so let's see whether Barry makes progress, whether he reassures them, or whether his answers lead to more questions. Okay. So Special Agent Grussing asked what Barry meant by a fair way to think. It is quite an interesting statement. Barry said, I don't think about her the way I did before you told me that, meaning the affair. He says, obviously, I think any guy would say that. I love her, I forgive her, but the betrayal is just harder. And I never was unfaithful on my part. So I just don't understand it. I wonder what he was going to say when he says, I never was unfaithful during I think he was going to say during my marriage. And the way that he says it almost sounds like a fait accompli, that he knows the marriage is over because he believes she's no longer alive, kind of thing. anyway, it's kind of quite interesting that he says during my, then he changes that to on my part. Then he says, so I just don't understand it. I want to blame it on the cancer, the chemo, the drugs, the alcohol. And if I could blame it on that, I would feel better. I mean, I don't even think the girls would talk to her if they found out she did this. And that brings us to footnote 70. And footnote 70 reads, at the end of this interview, Barry tells agents he has told the girls about Suzanne's affair. So at the beginning of the interview, he's kind of saying, you know what, if the girls knew about this, I don't think they would talk to her. And now it turns out that he's actually told them this. So is he protecting them from the truth? Question mark. Special Agent Grussing asked about the time when Barry texted someone, it's redacted, in Mexico about Suzanne not being the one receiving texts from redacted. Barry replied, well, redacted had been. She had witnessed it once before at the house where it was a time where Suzanne was really just banging me up about me having somebody. And I was kind of at my wit's end and grabbed her phone. Now, I just want to stop the statement right there. It's quite interesting that in his own words, Barry says, just kind of clear your mind and just think about Barry's own words, where he says, I was at my wit's end and grabbed her phone. And what that is possibly suggesting, what's something we need to determine whether it's true or not, is whether this was something that was, let's say, normal or ordinary, or something that was repeated. So if Barry was at his wit's end on another occasion, would he then grab her phone? So in other words, is there a link, a repeated link between Barry being at wit's end and grabbing Suzanne's phone? And as we've gone through this affidavit, we've seen there's a high degree of vigilance, a high degree of scrutiny, a high degree of surveillance from both sides, from Barry's side and from Suzanne, which seems like that, in terms of them kind of spying on one another's phone, keeping track of one another, using all sorts of surveillance techniques. It seems like each one is hiding infidelity, or alternatively, each one is suspecting the other of infidelity. And it's kind of this weird situation where possibly you have one spouse who is cheating, but who's trying to find out if the other one is cheating, and vice versa. I think Barry's position is that she was cheating, she was unreasonable to suspect him. She's now disappeared. He of course is innocent and he hasn't been cheating. Let's just have a look at some of your comments. Two Dog Night, thanks a lot for that. Andar Rogers says, like Brian Laundrie, these men are never violent or crazy, only their girlfriends and wives are. Sageti Nona, always think of spaghetti. It's a very busy time, lots of good content for me to catch up on. Good to see you here. Bria Lace, good to see you here. Kid says, Barry's a classic projector. We say howdy here. Sorry, I'm late. When did this interview take place in relation to the day of the disappearance? So this interview took place on the 5th of April. It's kind of a month shy of a year, so about 11 months after the fact. Suzanne disappeared on the 9th, arguably the 10th of May, 2020. This interview was conducted on the 5th of April, 2021. So it's really late. It's really a long time. It's taken quite a long time for the authorities to figure out what's going on. It's taken them, I think, something like 6 months to find out who Suzanne's paramour was, because he didn't come forward, and find out how deep that rabbit hole went, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to highlight where he says, I was at my wit's end and I grabbed her phone. And he says, I grabbed her phone one time. And he said, and something was at school, but redacted was there. So someone was actually there when he did it. And he said, and I just let redacted know. I said, you need to come down and hear this. I said, your mom thinks I'm having an affair. There's no way that I've ever done anything. And like I told you guys before, that was the only time we ever had arguments. And that brings us footnote 71 and says here, this is the second time Barry admitted to grabbing Suzanne's phone, with the other being the time in Mexico. So this is quite interesting. The authors of this affidavit are saying that there are at least two occasions. And so they are thinking, could this be something that Barry did quite often, grabbed her phone, right? Special Agent Harris said agents are concerned about Barry's end-of-life planning steps to include selling off assets and his statements of not being around anymore and his weight loss. Special Agent Grussing added that Barry's behavior with Shoshona, to include pictures of them taken at the Antis Hotel, appears concerning. That brings us to footnote 72. It says, Barry's relationship with Shoshona Dark is documented following this section. That's actually where the affidavit concludes, is with a little bit of surveillance footage. So if Barry was doing surveillance and spying on Suzanne, and Suzanne was spying on him, well, the authorities also kind of spied on Barry, and it seems like they came up with something. It's not like they spied on him and came away empty-handed. It was like, oh, well, much ado about nothing. They found something, or they thought they found something, and they appended that to the very end of the affidavit. It almost reads like a twist right at the end. So we will get to that in due course, but what's quite interesting here is, her name comes up, and it comes up April 5th, comes up pretty late in this narrative. And just look at the things that they mention here, that they say that the agents are concerned about Barry's end-of-life planning steps. I'm not really sure what that means. Does he mean, has he taken out life insurance for himself? Does it mean that he's contemplating suicide? Does it mean that he's started selling off major assets? Are they concerned that it seems like he's going to skip town? It seems like he's making some major changes, and his wife's not even been gone a year, and he seems to be making quite major changes. He's also been making statements about not being around anymore. I'm not sure what that means. Does it mean I'm not going to be in town anymore? Does it mean I'm not going to be alive anymore? Does it mean, what does it mean? And then they also refer to his weight loss. Now, one wonders what that's about. I can't remember who it was. It might have been the channel Plunder, actually showed some interesting footage of Barry's fluctuating weight through the years, where sometimes Barry's quite overweight and other times he's kind of in quite good shape. I find that quite I just find that quite interesting. I think if somebody did that about me, they would also find during my author stage, I was a certain what's the word, size and silhouette, compared to the more athletic stage, which I'm actually trying quite hard to get back to. Let's just look at some of your comments here. Stephanie's very, Terry Dean, good to see you. Daniela Marsico, Carol Johansson. Stephanie says, so good to see you all. Raul Thomas, Barry has told others that he'll die at either 55 or 57. That's interesting. Do you know who he said that to? Okay, so let's try and get through this. Barry said, so this is Barry's reaction to the agents saying, Barry, we're a bit worried about this. We're worried about this. We're worried about that. We're worried about that. And then they also mention Shoshana at the Antlers Hotel. And so this is Barry's reaction. He says, well, I'll tell you right now that she's a special person in my life. And I've told you before, she's a dear friend. There's nothing sexual going on with her and I. So he pertinently says that. He's kind of saying, we're not in a romantic relationship. And well, he doesn't say that in those words, but it seems like he's making the case that they are just friends. And of course, it turns out that he took her somewhere on Valentine's Day, which you'd wonder, do you take a just friend somewhere on Valentine's Day and give a just friend flowers and take them to a hotel and spend the night? Unless the person that they got on that surveillance was someone else. Barry said, so Barry's continuing to talk, and he says, and I didn't meet her until October 25th. So he's saying, in other words, the previous year. So he's saying that sometime after my wife disappeared, I met this other woman, right? He said the first time I ever even saw her face to face and talked to her was October 25th. So in a way, you can kind of applaud and you can say, thanks a lot, Barry. Thanks for volunteering that information. Okay, now let's go and check that out. Now let's go and check whether that's true. And if it is true, great, nice to know. If it's not, then you've got another problem. Why did you tell us that date if it's not that date? And so that's something to kind of note down. Is this date he's given accurate? Did he actually know Shoshana earlier? Barry said, by meeting Shoshana, God answered his prayer of, please give me something. He continued, he said, my daughters know about Shauna. So this is like the third paragraph. He's continuing to defend his relationship with Shauna. He says, they know we're friends, meaning his daughters. They know I go over there. And I've been there late at night, but we're talking and we're just helping each other. And that's it. Special Agent Grissing addressed the end of life planning again. And Barry said, no, I'll be honest with you guys. And I've shared this with you. This thing has been, I'm a tough guy. This has been painful to me. So I guess this is a reference to Barry possibly having suicidal thoughts, and we know he seemed to mention the same thing to Suzanne. They'd have an argument, it would get quite heated. If she was blaming him, then he would sort of say something about suicide. Anyway, he said, and just being done with it, I've definitely thought about it. I could never worry about that. I know that the selling of the assets is just for me to get out of here. I'm getting out of here. So if your question is Barry suicidal or is he going to skip town? That answer seems to throw both those balls in the air at the same time. Let me read that again. He says, I'm a tough guy. This has been painful to me. Now we're on page 94. And just being done with it, I've definitely thought about it. I could never worry about that. I know that the selling of the assets is just for me to get out of here. I'm getting out of here. And that brings up footnote 73 and says here, Barry has articulated numerous times he has considered suicide, has liquidated his assets and plans to leave town. So there you have it in a nutshell. And you can kind of get a sense from law enforcement that this would be a bit of a concern. You've moved all the way to Colorado you moved all the way to Colorado from Indiana. Then your wife disappears. Then I'm not sure if he inherits her estate, but certainly gets the house. Then he liquidates assets and then he seems to be ready to go somewhere else. But I mean, the investigation hasn't finished. Maybe shouldn't you wait and help with the investigation? Special Agent Grissing discussed the goal of agents to complete the audit. So the agents are kind of saying, whoa, Barry, we kind of still need to investigate. We kind of still need to talk to you. And he says, and they say, there are gaps that still exist. And and they have an intention to complete the investigation through the best means possible. Barry asks, and you assured me that if we get something for you guys, you'll clear me. Special Agent Grissing agreed, and Barry continued, I just need to move on from this to start healing. So it seems like Barry's saying, I need to not be here, then I'll start healing. If I get away from here, then things will start going better for me. Then there's a discussion of Exhibit 1. Special Agent Grissing introduced the first page. So it's taken all this time just to get down to brass tacks. Okay, now we're going to deal with the actual kind of evidence that, or the pertinent things that law enforcement are preoccupied with. It's taken basically 2 or 3 pages of the affidavit and babbling to get to this point. So Special Agent Grissing introduces the first page, and it's a photo of the surroundings of Barry's house. And I guess it's the way I understand it, it's the Puma Path house. I don't know what the rest of you think. Do you think it's a different residence? But it's referred to, the page is titled Sheila's Visit in 2019. Tamika. So when asked what was going on, Barry laughed and said, and I told Suzanne this, and I don't know what she told Sheila, but I was in Arizona hunting, and I'd been camping for 7 days, smelled like crap, looked like crap. I thought they were out in town eating, and I just wanted to make sure they weren't in the house and just wanted to get in there and take a shower. So we don't really know exactly when this was, which month in 2019. We don't know whether Suzanne was having an affair at this stage. I think it's certainly possible that she was. But anyway, so Barry says, it sounds like Barry wanted to almost surreptitiously enter the house and take a shower because he smelled and he looked like crap. So he kind of wants to sneak in the house and kind of get washed up. And he says, and I looked and it didn't seem like anybody was there. Just went back and I went up on the hill and I looked. I didn't see anything. And they were in there, and I guess they called the Cushmans. And then Pete comes flying out with his pistol. So the impression you kind of get here is that someone actually witnesses Barry seeming to be acting in a way that they either mistakenly assume is threatening or not. I don't know. He's been hunting. But for whatever reason, they are quite alarmed by his behavior. He's it's not that he's breaking into his own home, but he doesn't sort of announce his arrival. And so I think his arrival is quite shocking under the circumstances. What do you guys think? Was this the Puma Path home? Natasha Richardson says, so many horrendous cases here. Are you guys with me that this is the Puma Path home? It's not sort of referred to specifically. Natasha Richardson says, I live in Colorado. Okay. Timmy likes lying on his back like I must sort of cradle him, and then he starts snoring. Okay, so Barry continued, I smelled like freaking crap and looked like crap, and he said he wanted to see if they were in the house. Special Agent Harris asked if Barry pulled his vehicle into the driveway. Now, what's quite interesting here is, couldn't you just call ahead and say, are you home? Or, it seems like he doesn't announce his arrival, but he's sort of quietly finding out who's home and what's going on. And this, again, is a potential precedent for possibly his behavior on the 9th, that day when he came home. And so Special Agent Harris specifically asked Barry, did you pull your vehicle into the driveway? Did you park in the driveway kind of like a normal person? And this is Barry's answer. He says, no, I pulled into Betty's drive over here in the cul-de-sac. And then he pointed towards the top of the page. So he's saying, I arrived home, but I didn't park in my driveway. I parked somewhere else. And then I kind of snuck in. Special Agent Grissing asked, why did you park away from your house? And Barry said, just because I wanted to see if they were there. He said he could shower somewhere else if he needed to, but I haven't seen my wife in 7 days. I'm going to shower. I didn't want Sheila to see me like this. That's all I was doing. Special Agent Grissing said agents were wondering if Barry suspected Suzanne was at the house with her lover. So in other words, is he acting like that because he's trying to not trap her, but catch her in flagrante kind of thing? Is he trying to, and I guess it's possible that Barry didn't believe that Sheila was there with Suzanne. Maybe Barry thought Suzanne's, while the cat's away, the mice will play kind of thing. Barry replied, no, I knew Sheila was there. When Special Agent Grissing repeated, you knew Sheila was there, he said, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So it's quite interesting that this has come up. Again, it's a possible precedent. Let's just look at some of your comments. Robbie says, did he come home early to catch her out? Bria says, I want to visit too. Some people really love it there. Do you mean Colorado? I wouldn't mind going there as well. Okay, so now we're going on to page 95. Now it's Exhibit 2. Special Agent Grissing told Barry that Agent Derek Graham previously reviewed with him some of the items on a list made by Suzanne, last backed up on May 8th. So what he's going to do now is go through Suzanne's list and ask Barry about some of these notes. And this is a really effective strategy. You present something to someone and then you get their reaction. Present something else, get their reaction. And then you've got their story, and then you can kind of say, cross-reference that to previous statements. And they may have forgotten that they said something about something else based on the way that this is listed, if that makes sense. Barry was asked if Suzanne ever went through this list with Barry. He said, no, but there's things that she would throw at me when she was accusing me of doing something. So if you want to go through that. Special Agent Grissing said agents would like to discuss a few items, but not the entire list. Barry was shown the line, and this is what Suzanne wrote, can't be healthy and stay in this relationship. Can't be healthy and stay in this relationship. And one wonders, was she ultimately right in that statement? It seems like, anyway, so it could be that she was right, or it could be that maybe she wasn't right. But Barry's asked about the statement, and this is how he reacts. He's asked if she told him that, to which he replied she did not. Special Agent Harris told Barry about the recording from the pen when Suzanne said Barry controlled what she could eat or wear, and Barry interjected, but I've never done that. I've never controlled her like that. So this is quite an interesting thing that's going on here, is Barry's shown this line, and the agents are prepared with this kind of a rebuttal. Before he's even said anything, they know about the recording on the pen when Suzanne said Barry controlled what she could eat or wear and so on, right? So it feels like the agents are kind of trying to catch him out, or perhaps even trying to fluster Barry. Does that seem fair to say? One can almost imagine there's no easy way out of this question, even if Barry's innocent. If Barry's innocent, and innocent of a crime, and is asked, what do you think of Suzanne saying it can't be healthy and stay in this relationship? And he says, Yeah, I can understand she said that because she was really worrying and she would have headaches because I gave her a lot of stress. To some extent, he's going to dig a hole for himself, but to another extent, you can kind of say that sounds reasonable, or not reasonable, but it sounds like that's what's the word? Plausible, right? So instead of acknowledging that and admitting that, Barry denies that, and then they sort of bring up the audio from the spy pen when Suzanne said Barry controlled what she would eat or wear, which does sound like he's, well, let me put it this way. Does it sound like Barry's at a level of controlling that is normal or kind of average and thus healthy, I guess? I don't know if control is ever healthy, but I suppose a certain basic level is normal. Or is it another level that is concerning and possibly dangerous? He goes on to say, and there was one time, so I must say, if there's, I think, one aspect, if you want to evaluate your relationship with someone, if there's just one area where you ascertain the health of your relationship, look at the way that control is dealt with. Do you feel very controlled? Also, do you exert a lot of control? Must someone always kind of dance to the beat of your drum? Is it your way or the highway? Is it somebody else's way or the highway? And to the extent that the control is, what's the word? I don't want to say bearable. It shouldn't be bearable, but to the extent that the control is not very restricting and limiting, that's going to give you a sense that your relationship is healthy. Another good indicator is contempt. If there's contempt in a relationship, probably means it's doomed. So going back to the statement, we're on page 95. Special Agent Grissing says, Barry says, I've never controlled her like that. Then he adds, he says, there was one time where we did get into a fight and where she said, my cancer came back because of you, the stress that you're putting on me, and she did blame that on me during an argument. So here you actually have Barry almost walking back what he's just said. So a moment ago he said, I've never done that. I've never controlled her. And then he adds, in a way that is an admission, that it has been kind of unhealthy for her. She actually says, my cancer came back because of you. And I must say, when I studied this case in the beginning, and I was, and I became aware that Suzanne had cancer twice, the thought did cross my mind, is Barry directly or indirectly responsible for that? Both those questions. Is Barry directly responsible? Is Barry indirectly responsible? Why did her cancer come back? And there's another high-profile case where someone's cancer comes back. It's the John Benet Ramsey case. I think the circumstances there are a little bit different, but I also think cancer can be something that eats at you the same way stress eats at you. And if you don't deal with the source of that hurt and pain and anger, then even if you live a healthy lifestyle, it's going to get the better of you. And I think she did get that memo that I need to live. I need to be alive in order to be alive, kind of thing. So it's just quite an interesting aspect to think about. So she says, my cancer came back because of you, the stress that you're putting on me. And so he admits it. And she did blame that on me during an argument. So the fact that he admits it actually in a way, in a strange way, makes Barry less suspicious in a way. I say that with a little bit of a disclaimer, with a little bit of an asterisk. I'm just saying, if he totally denied it, then you would wonder. But the fact that he actually admits it shows that he is being honest after not being completely forthcoming. Special Agent Grissing asked if that argument occurred here or in Indiana, and Barry replied, I believe it was here. Yeah. So he's actually saying that they'd argued about her health and her cancer in Colorado. In other words, within I think the 2 years that they'd been there. So it's fairly recent. When asked how he responded to her, Barry said, I'm like, there's just, how can you say that? He added, huh? How can she say these things about me if and then I think he was going to say, I'm speculating here. I think he was going to say, how can she say these things about me if she's having an affair? Something like that. I don't know what else he was going to say. How can she say these things about me if she, I don't know, what do you think she's going to say? Then he says, I never understood it till now. Now she's got a lover. Well, there he does bring it up. Well, yeah, she's going to try everything she can to get friction between us. So it's almost like he's saying she's contriving this argument. She doesn't really think it. She's just trying to create a premise for them to sort of break up, to have arguments and break up. Jean Karras, good of you to join us. Natasha says stress does take a toll on the body. It certainly does. Yvonne Phillips, good to see you here, says cancer has a tendency to reoccur, and that, along with continued stress, is a bad recipe. There's a healthy level of stress, and then there's an unhealthy level. Often the unhealthy level is when you are struggling to sleep and has a bearing on your weight. For some people, you lose weight. For some people, you gain. Special Agent Grissing cited the May 6th text. That's the text where Suzanne says, I'm done. I could care less what you've been up to, and something about let's try and do this in a civil way. That's the text from May 6th. Remember, she disappeared 3 days later after saying, I'm done. Suzanne, so the affidavit says that this text from Suzanne was saying that the marriage was over, and Barry's response that he loves her and was trying to control his hurt heart. He was trying to control his hurt heart. Now, remember in the past when he said he's at wit's end, he would go and look at what was on her phone. Special Agent Grissing described Suzanne wounding him deeply and him trying to move forward. Barry said, yeah, the wound is her falsely accusing me. It's quite interesting that for him, the wound is being accused of cheating on her, not that she's cheated on him or that she's disappeared. Anyway, he says, the wound is her falsely accusing me, and I just never understood how to handle that. I can't prove anything to her, but you would think after 32 years, all the dedication and love that she would trust me, that I'm not going to lie to her about it. Barry said, and if I did have a woman and I wanted to get it off my chest and get counseling and move forward, that I would probably do that with her because I loved her. If I made a mistake, it was a mistake. Barry added, but I didn't, and I just couldn't get it in her head. It's quite weird how Barry talks. I don't know, it's definitely quite strange, and that's why they've highlighted this. It feels like it could be an admission, but then it's not. Let me read it again. Barry says, I'm not going to lie to her about it. Then he says, and if I did have a woman and I wanted to get it off my chest and get counseling and move forward, that I would probably do that with her because I loved her. If I made a mistake, it was a mistake. It's quite interesting where he uses the word get over and over again. He says, I wanted to get it off my chest and get counseling and get, what do you think the gist is when you say I want to get something? I know Chris Watts used the word fix often when he was getting into a fix. And Barry is using the word get. What do you think he wants to get? He says, I wanted to get it off my chest and get counseling and move forward. Anyway, so he goes on to say, Special Agent Grusing interjected to point to the knew I was looking at phone in bonus. So this is a note that Suzanne wrote. Knew I was looking at phone in bonus. That line from Suzanne's grievance list. And so Grusing asks Barry about that. He said, she thought I had a camera in the deer eyes of my mounts. She thought there were cameras in there, and I threatened to rip them out and prove it. I didn't want to tear my deer mounts up, but, and yeah, Special Agent Grusing interjected to ask if Suzanne talked to Barry about him seeing her on her phone. I'm not sure if that should be on his phone, but anyway, Special Agent Grusing interjected to ask if Suzanne talked to Barry about him seeing her on her phone. So I just want to stop this and just again point out the language, the lexicon that he uses here. So he is now accused of, well, I don't quite know what knew I was looking at phone in bonus. I don't know what the in bonus means, but it seems like Suzanne felt that Barry knew that she was looking at her phone, something like that. Anyway, what I want to point out is the words that he uses where he says, I threatened to rip him out and prove it. Then he says, I didn't want to tear my deer mounts up, but, and then he's interrupted. So just in those two sentences, he's talking about ripping them out and tear my deer mounts up. And I've previously mentioned the way that Barry talks about deer, sometimes when he's referring to Suzanne. Now, I don't want to make too much of an analogy here, except to say this is quite violent language. Tearing his mounts up basically means dismembering the mounts, tearing apart the stuffed animal, I guess. And then he also says, I threatened to rip him out, meaning, I guess, rip the camera out of the face or the skull of the deer, right? That's literally what he's saying. I threatened to rip him out and prove it. I didn't want to tear my deer mounts up, but then he goes on to say, yeah, I've never seen anything on her phone that would just divulge what she was doing. Never. That's quite an interesting word as well, divulge. We've gotten to know Barry quite well, and he uses words like crap quite a lot. And then here he says divulge. Divulge is kind of a non-Barry term. I could be wrong. Maybe Barry uses the word divulge all the time, but divulge seems like kind of a word that is read or kind of a legal kind of term. It's kind of like a artificial term where Barry's kind of overthinking something. I'm speculating, but divulge is quite a strange word for Barry to be using here. He says, I've never seen anything on her phone that would divulge what she was doing, right? Let me read that again. Yeah, I've never seen anything on her phone that would just divulge what she was doing. Never. It's an absolute statement from Barry. He's saying, I've never, ever seen anything on her phone that would tell me what she was doing. Never. And I've said this before, that Barry can be extremely absolute about certain things. He's absolutely certain, absolutely convinced. There's no exceptions. He's absolutely 100% certain. But then in other areas, he's very wishy-washy and vague and uncertain. It's just kind of two sides to Barry. He can be incredibly absolute about stuff, and then very kind of vague about something else, right? So here he's saying, I've never, ever, ever, ever seen anything on her phone. But if you think about it, the agents seem to know of two instances where he was at wit's end and grabbed her phone. So can one put those two side by side and say, this is inconsistent, or this, what is going on here? What does he actually mean? Did he just, what does he actually mean? I've never seen anything on her phone that would just divulge what she was doing. Special Agent Grissing asked about the May 6th text when Barry told Suzanne, I'm sorry that things went the way they did. And then he was saying, what's that about? And Barry said, the argument. Barry continued, and I said this all the time to myself, Barry, you do not need to get fired up and just show her love. It's quite an interesting choice of words, where he talks to himself in response to an argument and said, Barry, don't get fired up, just show her love. What happens when Barry gets fired up? It's quite an interesting choice of words, fired up. One wonders whether the hearth, the fireplace, got fired up on the night in question. We know they barbecued. We know that he barbecued. So one wonders what role fire does play. Just interesting that he says, you do not need to get fired up. Anyway, now we're on page 96. Barry said, so with Suzanne, that's what I was saying through this thing. I'm like, Barry, you got to love her. Just show her love. Don't let her get you fired up and get into an argument. Special Agent Grissing reviewed the Wednesday morning text with Suzanne and Barry's responses. So once again, he shows Barry the text, asks him what he thinks about it, and then basically gets Barry's response. And now he's actually showing the actual responses from what he has. So Special Agent Grissing asked if the argument happened before he went to work, before Barry went to work. Barry said, no, I think it was during work. I was actually on the Bobcat working here, texting her and now, I didn't understand it that morning, but I do now. I mean, she was trying to make me do something or make me leave her or something because of this guy. So he seems to kind of stutter here. It's the way I'm reading it is exactly the way they've captured it in the affidavit. So they obviously think it's important. I'm going to read that again. Special Agent Grissing reviewed the Wednesday morning text with Suzanne and Barry's responses, then asked if the argument happened before he went to work. Barry said, no, I think it was during work. I was actually on the Bobcat working here, texting her and now, I didn't understand it that morning, but I do now. I mean, she was trying to make me do something or make me leave her or something because of this guy. It's quite interesting what he's saying here is she's trying to make me do something or make me leave her. She's trying to make me do something or make me leave her. Special Agent Grissing asked what Suzanne said that morning, and Barry asked via text, ? So it actually makes you think that in a way, Barry should have been asked, what did she actually say that morning? Because he's now shifting it to what did she ask via text? And then Barry sighed and he said Suzanne was accusing him of being with a woman. So this was on the Wednesday before she disappeared, She disappeared Saturday afternoon going into Sunday morning. Sunday was Mother's Day. And so 3 days before that, they had quite a serious argument. Vicky Parsons says, I wonder how many times she wanted a divorce. Okay, let's keep going. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry, since Suzanne had a lover for 2 years at this point, why she should care if he had a girlfriend. It's quite a good question. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry, since Suzanne had a lover for 2 years at this point, why should she care if he had a girlfriend? So thanks a lot, Faticus. Enjoy your program. It took a while. I'm back at work. Thanks a lot for that. So Barry's now got to respond to this. I think it is a good question. If she's having an affair, why would she really be bothered by him maybe having an affair? If you think of it in a basic way, if she's having an affair and she doesn't want to be married anymore, and she thinks or suspects or knows that Barry's having an affair, it's kind of like, why are we staying married? You having an affair, I'm having an affair. The whole marriage is a farce, so why are we? Right? Conversely, if Barry is having an affair, why is he hiding it? You know what I mean? Is it because he desperately wants to stay married? If that's the answer, why does he desperately want to stay married if he's also having an affair? It's just quite an interesting dynamic to think about. So, and the agents obviously have been thinking about it themselves. So they say, you know, if Suzanne had a lover for 2 years, why should she care if he has a girlfriend? Now, Barry, what's your response to that? Barry says, the only thing I can think of is because she would justify her thing to the girls. And it's quite an interesting word there. He uses this word justify 3 times in quick succession in this paragraph on page 96. And I've kind of highlighted each one. Justify, justify, justify. So this is what he says. So in other words, why is she asking about him having an affair? Because it's to justify her thing to the girls. So it's almost like so that she can say to the girls, yeah, I'm having an affair, but your dad is as well. So I'm justified. I'm justified having an affair because he is as well. Do you think that's true? Because I kind of get the impression Suzanne didn't want the girls to know about any of the infidelities, right? Not Barry's or hers. Special Agent Grissing mentioned divorce, and Barry said, yeah, it would justify her divorcing if that's what she wanted. So it does seem like she was justified in getting divorced in terms of she's having an affair. She's, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm saying that a bit wrong. She's decided she wants to get divorced. And I guess from a particular perspective, you can say she was justified in wanting to get divorced. The odd thing is that Barry seems to think that that is, I'm not sure what he thinks. He says it would justify her divorcing if that's what she wanted. I mean, or it would justify her having her affair if she thought in her mind, which there was sometimes where I truly believe that she really thought that. And I thought that her mind just went crazy in that place. But now that I found all the stuff out, I'm thinking she did that purposefully to try to manipulate the situation with her family. So Barry's kind of says this quite often, that Suzanne is the manipulator, right? But you kind of get the idea that Suzanne is actually quite a soft kind of person. kind of a kind, soft person. Not that kind, soft people aren't ever manipulators, but I mean, look at Chris Watts. He's got that sort of kind, soft vibe going, and he was super manipulative in his situation. What I find a little bit strange is that, so is Suzanne, according to Barry's argument, is Suzanne justifying a 2-year affair? She's justifying that based on accusing Barry of also having an affair. So had she believed for 2 years that he's having an affair, that's why she's having one? Or is she kind of only at the end saying, well, Barry's also having an affair and it's actually not true and she knows it's not true? It's kind of just a weird mind game if you think of it the one way and the other way. Special Agent, so there's actually a photo. You can't really see much. You just see a hand poking out from the table and the top of Barry's head, but it's quite weird how they were recording this kind of out of sight. Special Agent Harris said that Suzanne thought Barry was having an affair at one point. This is the agent's words. Suzanne thought Barry was having an affair at one point. Barry was asked what her distant unlovingness from his text to Suzanne meant to him. What does distant unlovingness mean? And this is a text that Barry sent to her. What's going on there? What does distant unlovingness mean? Barry said, just being cold towards me. I mean, I didn't understand it at the time, but now if she was in love with someone else and didn't want me, it makes perfect sense now that she was just being distant. Special Agent Harris asked if he felt that for a while. In other words, did he feel that she was being distant for a while? I think the flip side to this is, did Suzanne experience that from Barry? Did Suzanne experience Barry being distant? And we did a previous analysis where Barry said something like, I was never home, I was never emotionally available to her. One of the key features of someone being in an affair is that they become emotionally unavailable, they become distant. That's also one of the key features of premeditation, as we saw with Scott Peterson and Chris Watts. You have there's a bit of a coldness and distancing that sets in prior to something taking place. But an affair is the same thing. You've girded your loins emotionally already, and so you're already withdrawing in that sense. And so the question is, was Suzanne doing that? Okay, well, what about Barry? What was Suzanne's experience of Barry? Barry responded, talking about Valentine's Day in Florida being amazing, and looking back, she'd talk to this guy and she'd get a different face on and then be cold, and then she would come to her senses. He continued, I just blamed it on her cancer. She's been fighting this in her mind. So the agent's kind of trying to find out, Barry, how could you not know that she was having an affair? What were you thinking based on her behavior? So Barry's saying, I blamed it on her cancer. She's been fighting this in her mind since we left Indiana because that's when she was diagnosed. So I didn't want to ruffle any feathers during her treatment, but it was hard for me to just show her love and take care of her during this time and not get my feelings hurt when she was cold or when she did something, drugs or alcohol. Just kind of saying, it was hard for me to show her love. It was hard for me to take care of her, I guess, when she had cancer. And he's saying, it was hard for me to do this and not get my feelings hurt. The other thing I want to highlight here just are the words where he says, I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. It's quite if you think about hunters and what they do when they do their thing, there's quite a lot of ruffling of feathers, pulling feathers out. It's not necessarily a bird. It could also be another creature. but let's just say there's plenty of ruffling of feathers. And it's quite interesting what he says here. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers during her treatment. It's quite a strange way of referring to a person. It's within this, as Stephanie says, this hunting lingo, this hunting psychology. Then it comes up, something really interesting comes up. It's at the bottom of page 96. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry if he bought a VPN, that's a virtual private network, on his, it's on redacted credit card, reference Suzanne's note, bought VPN security using redacted name/card, question mark. And then there's a footnote 74. Virtual private network allows users to create a secure connection to another network over the internet. So there's kind of this impression of, so we know of Barry as a hunter, but it kind of feels like there may be an online version of Barry the Hunter. So it's kind of Barry the online hunter, Barry the online, I don't want to say stalker, but Barry the online spy, or whatever you want to call it. It's the same psychology online, right? And so this is, again, something that the agents are kind of preoccupied with. It's something that they think is quite important. And of course, it's something Suzanne mentions. Barry, what do you think about this? Why did you buy a VPN? What's going on? So this is Barry's response. Now we're on page 97. Barry said, no. So the question was, did you buy a VPN? Barry says, no. Then he says, if I did, it was an accident. And I think I don't even know what that is, but I think I told Redacted and Mom that I was trying, I think somebody called me about fraud and said, you need this to protect yourself. And if that's what you're talking about. So it's quite interesting where he sort of first denies it. He says, no, I didn't buy a VPN. Then he says, if I did, it was an accident. Then he says, I don't even know what it is. What is a VPN? And then he doesn't actually ask. He doesn't say, what is a VPN? He says, no, I didn't get a VPN. Then he says, I don't know what a VPN is. So, and then he also says, you need this to protect yourself. And he ends off saying, if that's what you're talking about. So you kind of got to decide, you see a statement like that, it's kind of erratic. Is Barry confused? Is Barry truthful? Is Barry credible? Is Barry believable? What do you think? And so you take that statement and you take quite a lot of his other statements and you put them together and you say, each statement that Barry gives, is he making progress in terms of the investigation, in terms of his own credibility, in terms of his own innocence, in terms of his own case? Or do his answers lead to more questions? Or is it just kind of going nowhere? Does it sort of just go somewhere in between? Special Agent Grussing said the purchase of the VPN was in February 2020. That's quite interesting. So Barry purchases the VPN in February 2020 and Suzanne dies about 2 months later. Suzanne disappears 2 months later. Barry said, yeah, if that was it, I thought I was buying fraud protection and I didn't know what I was buying. But obviously, if my memory recalls what I was buying right, I think Suzanne thought I was doing something, secretly, which I wasn't. So once again, it's this idea of either Barry is sneaking around online or he's trying to cover his tracks online, or Barry's just kind of stumbling around and he's not, as I say, he's either kind of being wishy-washy. Remember, I've said Barry is either totally certain and he's absolutely 100% about something, or it's like very kind of wishy-washy. This is the wishy-washiness. Did you buy a VPN? Well, I bought something, I don't know really what it was, and if I did, it was by an accident. What is it? That's the wishy-washy version. Then the next one, Special Agent Grissing asked about Suzanne's note, bedroom profession about marrying, having babies. I must say, I don't know what that means. I've got no idea what that means. It says here, in reference to someone else. Barry laughed and said, no, we was having sex one time and I said it to her. I guess that means he was having sex with Suzanne and he said that to her. I guess about marrying and having babies. I don't quite know how that makes sense. Why would he ask his wife to marry him and have babies when they've already done that? They are married, and if anything, they seem to be like they don't want to be married. So again, I don't know. For me, that seems an odd statement to make. Is that what he meant? So he said, I was having sex and I said it to her. I was just in the heat of the moment in a sexual frenzy. I'd said it directly to her. I said, I want to marry you and have babies, but she thought I was talking to my hand, this woman that's in my hand in a chip. So your guess is as good as mine what that actually means. So Barry says he said directly to her, I guess meaning Suzanne, I want to marry you and have babies. Maybe it is a kind of a term of endearment. But then, according to him, Suzanne thought he was talking to his hand, which one would almost imagine you talking to your phone. I mean, if you're talking to your hand, usually you've got a phone in your hand. And then he said, this woman that's in my hand in a chip. Not quite sure what that means. Special Agent Grissing addressed Suzanne's complaints regarding security cameras, asking Barry if he removed the DVR or recording device for the home system, that wires seemed disconnected. So there are quite a lot of security cameras. This is the home system where the wires seem disconnected, but there's another system as well that Barry set up himself. So it's quite interesting that Suzanne was complaining about this and concerned about this. There's the home security system that's now disabled. And there are quite a few situations where in high-profile true crimes where the home security, the stuff that's supposed to protect the occupants from the home, are disconnected by a family member prior to something taking place. You have that in the Chris Watts case. You have that, I think, possibly in the Oscar Pistorius case, where there's something about the alarm system being off, and Oscar was hypervigilant as well. You have something vaguely similar in the John Benet Ramsey case, where they also have an alarm system, but it's apparently off that night. And John Ramsey's kind of John Ramsey runs like this $1 billion, computer business, and he's very, he knows about electronics. I think his reason was they turned it off because it would go off by itself, and it was annoying. But nevertheless, you have this situation where someone turns off their own, in terms of this particular situation, this scenario where someone seems to turn off their own system and then something horrible happens. Look at the Chris Watts case. Margaret Sabinski, thank you very much. Thanks so much for that. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Karina says she sensed that he was monitoring her. Stephanie says all the security and then none of it working, in inverted commas, broken. Okay, let's keep going. So So she's quite concerned about that. Barry said, I don't remember. And I would almost bet $100,000 that she took him out, So he's saying Suzanne did that. So if I'm following this, Suzanne makes a note that, was this a note that she made, or I don't know if this is one of her grievances, but why would you complain about the security cameras and then you've disconnected them yourself? Anyway, so she took them out. It's quite a easy thing. You just invert it to the other person. She did it. And then he says, they never worked. So now it's also like a multitude of answers. She took it out. It never worked. He says, when we got there, they did for a little bit, and I hired a company to come, and I don't know if they didn't work because of her sabotaging them or what, but I could care less about him, so it didn't matter to me. So it's quite interesting, the language he uses here. It's the same language she used on him. I could care less about what you've been up to. And yeah, he says, I could care less about him. Now, if you think about it, for a while, Barry was suggesting that someone came into the house, that the bicycle was staged, and that someone actually came into the house and ... Now, you would imagine if he thought that or feared that he would be particularly interested in the home surveillance footage, because that would help solve the case, right? Instead, he says, I could care less about it. So it didn't matter to me. You would think in a situation where your wife has disappeared kind of from your house, how important that CCTV footage would be, just like the footages of Shanann arriving home and Trinasic's footage. That footage was potentially available for the Puma Path home, but because it was disconnected, I think it doesn't exist. And so what's Barry's response to it not really existing? What's Barry's response to it being disconnected? He says, I could care less about him. It didn't matter to me. And he's saying that she sabotaged it. It's quite a strong word, that as well. It's also a word like divulge. It's quite a strong word to say sabotage. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry if he could use his phone, if he could use Barry's phone to see the camera's footage. And he said, well, that's what I do with my door security. I just got the alarm set, so if somebody comes in, they think the cops are coming, but it's not hooked directly to a company. So yeah, you've got confirmation that Barry's got surveillance, similar to what Chris Watts had, where you can, I guess it's a Ring doorbell or something, where he can remotely see what's going on through his phone. I think this is with reference to the Pontius Springs apartment. It's kind of a bit unclear often in the affidavit what they're actually talking about. But I mean, here he says, Grissing asked Barry if he could use his phone to see the camera's footage. And Barry said, well, that's what I do with my door security. It sounds like that's present tense. I just got the alarm set, meaning that sounds like I just got the alarm set now. So if somebody comes in, they think the cops are coming, but it's not hooked directly to a company. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry if he synced the cameras from his house to his phone. It's quite an important and pertinent point. Barry answered, I don't think I could ever get him. And I thought, so he doesn't say yes or no. Yes, I synced them. No, I didn't. He says, I don't think I could ever get him. And I thought it was because of the bad reception, the cell service in the mountains. So after everything happened, I could do that, but I couldn't always get him on my phone because of the cell service. But sometimes I could. So there's another wishy-washy. I could do it, but sometimes I couldn't. But then sometimes I could. Special Agent Grissing asked, sometimes you could, ? Grissing and Harris asked Barry what wireless service he used to send the signal from the cameras to his phone? Great question, because now you can actually test that statement. And it puts Barry in a bit of a bind, because if he gives them the answer, they can now test and determine how strong the signal is. So Barry does qualify, says sometimes you could, and now Barry answers, so what wireless service? Barry said, I didn't know if it happened through HughesNet, was our internet provider. I didn't know. I just know when the new guy, put the new ones in, he showed me the app. Special Agent Grusing asked if Barry could get the camera feed sporadically. It's kind of a weird answer there. I don't know. I think he was going to say, I didn't know if it routinely happened. I don't know if that's what he's going to say, but he says, I didn't know if it happened through HughesNet, was our internet provider. I didn't know. I just know that when the new guy, put the new ones in, he showed me the app. Okay. It's also quite a weird answer, that. So, Barry, could you get the camera feed sporadically? Could you get it sometimes? Barry said, yeah. I could never open them when I just wanted to. It just seemed like sometimes they would open, sometimes. Special Agent Grusing interjected, asking Barry what app he used. Barry replied, Luna. I think Luna, yeah. Barry stated, under my best recollection, all of my cameras were in my safe because I never used cameras in hunting season. Every once in a while, I'd put one on the driveway just to see a car coming in and out. So this is Barry actually volunteering. He's not asked, he volunteers this. Unless it's asked, but it's just not included in the affidavit. He says, under my best recollection, all of my cameras were in my safe because I never used cameras in hunting season. I don't know if that makes sense. Why would you not use cameras in hunting season? Wouldn't you pertinently use them in hunting season? Maybe I'm missing something. Well, every once in a while, I'd put one on the driveway just to see a car coming in and out. So he's admitting that he actually put cameras, this is his own cameras used for hunting, they're kind of like camouflaged cameras, on the driveway. So he's watching who's coming in and out of the driveway. Just look at some comments here. Axis here. Natasha Richardson says, I turned 38 yesterday and Suzanne was completely healthy and menopause had nothing to do with what happened. Happy birthday, Natasha. Okay, let's keep going. Special Agent Grusing said agents try to find Barry chasing the chipmunks. This is such an amazing point. I mean, it shows you if you stick with the narrative, and you think critically, how clever you can be. So Special Agent Grusing said agents tried to find Barry chasing the chipmunks on his own cameras, the cameras that he'd recovered, and they couldn't. So Barry's been making these statements that, whenever he comes home, he chases chipmunks and he's chased 85. 85 is a lot. Can they find some evidence on his own cameras of Barry running around? Can they find him shooting one chipmunk? Can they find any footage of Barry running around after chipmunks in the sort of back garden? Because according to Barry, he's done it many, many times. So there should be some footage of that. But the agents say they couldn't find any. So what's your response to that, Barry? What's your response to, we can't find any proof of you doing what you said on your own equipment? So he says, well, I don't think any cameras were there. They were in the safe. He added, everything was in the safe. They took everything from the safe. next page, page 98. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry how he knew the chipmunk was outside to chase it that day. So again, a very clever way of not letting this go. How did you know there was a chipmunk there to chase it? He said, oh, they're always out there. That's just what I do. I mean, I've shot 85 chipmunks at my house, and when I'm bored, I shoot chipmunks. Special Agent Grussing said, right, and asked if the chipmunk gun was in the car or truck with him, and he said he did not remember. That's also a good point. So was it a case where you arrived home and you just happened to have the chipmunk gun on you, and so you sort of ran out after the chipmunks and you somehow knew that the chipmunk was there? Yeah, so we're on page 98. Barry said he couldn't remember. Especially, this is also a really good point. I put a big orange exclamation mark here. Special Agent Grussing noted from the evidence that it appeared Barry made it from the garage to the porch in 7 seconds and asked Barry if he remembered where the gun was. So it's quite an interesting observation here. They seem to be alleging or suggesting or asking, Barry, were you sprinting at this point? Were you like sprinting from the garage to the porch, possibly with a gun in your hand? What was so urgent that you had to be running at breakneck speed through your home? And so how does Barry respond? I don't recall. I don't recall where the gun was. He said it could have been in the truck. It might have been, but I don't recall. Special Agent Grussing asked if the scope was mounted on the gun at the time, and Barry said, yeah, nodding his head. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry what he did with this. Again, a really great follow-up. So you shoot 85 chipmunks, okay, so what do you do with them? What do you do with these chipmunks after you've killed them? And he said he either threw it up on the hill where the crows come and get them, or down by the river. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry about Suzanne's statement, just wrestled free. And Barry said, I've never constricted her with my arms, never. So once again, now it's an absolute statement again from Barry. Now I'm 100% sure I've never ever done this. And it's also interesting the word that he uses. It's a strange word. He doesn't say strangled. He doesn't say what other word could one use there? I've never held. He doesn't say the word held or something like that, or gripped or grabbed. Those are all words that I think would be more part of your everyday vocabulary. They would sort of be colloquial, right? And he says constricted. Have you ever, in your life, have you ever said the word constricted with relation to somebody else? I didn't constrict that person. No, I didn't constrict that person. I may have hugged you a little bit too tightly, but I didn't constrict you. Have you ever said that? It's just a very strange word. Stephanie says, note where he disposes of the chipmunks. So I don't know, the word constricted is a very mechanical, if you think of the boa constrictor doing its thing, it's a very kind of animalistic action, right? It's constricting, almost like if you tied someone up in ropes, you would constrict them. So anyway, he says, I've never constricted her with my arms, never. And it's quite a weird thing to say. Like, do you need to say your arms or your hands? But so why would she say I've just wrestled free? Wrestled free from what? Blankets or something? He says, I've never constricted her with my arms, never. could he have constricted her with something else? He says, and I, if we were ever in an argument, it's quite weird how he qualifies it. He says, I've never done that ever. I've never done that, never. And then he says, and if we were ever in an argument, I would push up against her. So he's saying, well, this is what I would do. And then she would maybe slip around me, and I've never grabbed her and constricted her. It's the second time that he repeats this word constricted. But look at the words that he uses. Constricted talks about an argument, push up against her, slip around me, grabbed, constricted. And then he says, and I told you the one incident where I struck her. All of this is stuff that Barry's volunteering. So look at these words: constricted, argument, push up, slip around, grab her, constricted her, struck her. Then he says, that was the only time in my entire life where I ever did anything. So if she's saying there was anything physical besides that, it's absolutely 100% not true. So we know that there's this court order that there may not be any references to DV from a particular witness, and there's actually been a petition regarding. I'm not really going to go into that into too much detail, but this particular paragraph talks about Barry himself saying, I would push up against her and she would maybe slip around me. It also refers to Suzanne herself saying, I wrestled free. So there is some, what's the word? There is something to that discussion in this affidavit. And one wonders to what extent that's going to be raised in court, if it does go to court, and to what extent it'll be allowed to be raised. But once again, you have a kind of a combination of him being adamant and certain and also uncertain. So he says, I've never constricted her, but I would push up against her, maybe. Then he says, I've never grabbed her. And then but I mean, what is pushing up against someone? That's not grabbing. And then he says, the only time in my entire life where I ever did something, he's now talking about striking her. That was the only time in my entire life where I ever did anything. And we shouldn't think of that and a disappearance. We shouldn't see that as, that it's irrelevant. Barry's behavior in the past in this particular area is irrelevant. Barry was asked about redacted sheets being a free-for-all statement by him being related to a tranquilizer dart being used. Barry asked, in the house, ? So this is another statement. I'm not quite sure what this means. I don't know if it's something that he said or he said that Suzanne wrote down, but something about sheets being a free-for-all. I think it's something that Barry said, and it related to a tranquilizer dart being used. Barry asked, in the house, ? In other words, he's thinking about, is a tranquilizer dart used in the house? Grissing said it was unknown if it was used in the house, then asked if it was related to the sheets on the bed. So he seems to be saying, is the tranquilizer dart related to the sheets on the bed? It's quite a interesting context. Barry said, absolutely not. Once again, is absolutely certain. Absolutely not. I told you that what I do is I will open that back door and trank a deer in the backyard that's sitting there eating my grass. And if there's any trank dart anywhere, it's from one of those. Barry's absolutely certain. So you're not going to find a tranquilizer dart and a bed sheet sort of mixed up with one another. He said, what you'll find is a trank dart kind of out in the garden, maybe. And why? Because I'm tranquilizing a deer. Right? Once again, bear in mind that sometimes he mentions deer where you can sometimes imagine Suzanne's movement. It seems to sometimes overlap. And this is another possible instance of that. Suzanne was also in the back garden, and did he come out of that back door and trank a deer, or did something else happen? Special Agent Grissing said the evidence of the tranquilizer dart was found inside the house. Barry replied, yeah, or I've shot deer from that little breezeway from between the garage and the laundry room out that back door. That's a pretty incredible statement that he's making. He's kind of saying, I've kind of stood not even outside the house. I've kind of been sort of in the house or the doorway, and I've shot this tranquilizer dart. It's quite an incredible statement that he's actually acknowledging. Footnote 75. In the breezeway is located directly beside the lawn chairs where Barry earlier said that Suzanne was sunbathing when he came home at 2:44 p.m. when she provided Jeff Libler with her last proof of life. That's pretty incredible. And that is dealing with the afternoon of May 9th, the last time she was seen. So what seems to be in the thinking of law enforcement, as I understand it, is they're wondering whether Barry was, when he returned that day, where he stood, did he stand in the breezeway? Did he have a tranquilizer gun with him, and what did he do with it? They're asking about his movements, right, in terms of that. Special Agent Grissing asked about the back door, and Barry said the back door is outside the kitchen window where the bird bath is. He says, yeah. If there was a tranquilizer dart out there or outside or in the house, it's from me shooting a deer. Discussion of Exhibit 3. Special Agent Grissing showed Barry an exhibit labeled 12 consecutive calls, May 9th, and explained that investigators thought Suzanne may have disappeared Friday night until seeing the text between her and her lover. I kind of made the same mistake with Chris Watts. I thought Shanann, not Shanann, the Choran, the Watts Choran. I initially believed the Watts Choran disappeared on the Friday, or something happened to them on the Friday, or even on the Saturday. That was before we found out that they were at the birthday party on the Sunday. So investigators thought Suzanne may have disappeared Friday night. And I think the reason that they thought it was Friday was because of the very serious text, I'm done, 2 days earlier on May 6th. So the I'm done text happens on the Wednesday, which is kind of a big red flag. And then did something happen very shortly after that on the Friday? And that was why they were thinking that. On May 8th. Barry was told Suzanne's thinking at this point in the marriage was summed up by the May 6th text as opposed to Barry's assertions. Special Agent Grissing said that from 2:47 p.m. on Saturday forward, she was not responding to her lover. And I will kind of volunteer here. I have said it before. I don't think Suzanne died in the evening. I don't think she died under the cover of night. I think she died on Saturday afternoon. I don't think she went for a mountain bike ride either. And I based that impression on what appears to be the impression of law enforcement, because they keep talking about her last proof of life, and her last proof of life was this final text. And not only that, you have her sending messages and this very rapid two-way communication with her and Jeff Libler, and then suddenly it just stops, and then she never communicates again. What's going on with that? Now we're on page 99. Barry said, let's just have a look here. So Barry's now presented with this idea of her stopping communication with this final, and this is, you can imagine if Barry isn't innocent, this would be making him nervous. If he is innocent, it's pretty straightforward, what's going on, whatever. And so one wants to also look at it from that perspective. Do we get a sense of him appearing to be nervous in this particular area, which is the area dealing with possibly Suzanne's death? We can't be 100% sure. Her body hasn't been found, so one can't do an autopsy. I mean, even if you did it now, you wouldn't be able to ascertain time of death. But it's from, what do you call it? It's inferred that it could have been mid-afternoon on, that's what I think law enforcement think. Anyway, so he says, what do you think about this last text? And so Barry says, this is top of page 99. That's because we were together and we had talked about having a good evening together and putting phones down. So at the same time that they have a good evening, they seem to put their phones, I think, on airplane mode or turn their phones off. It seems like a similar scenario to Amanda Knox. They also have a good evening together, and just by coincidence, their phones are off at the same time Meredith Kircher is murdered. But they have a good evening together. Special Agent Harris explained how investigators looked at evidence and statements, considering people's biases versus the lack of bias from evidentiary items like cell phones and telematics. This is, again, a clever little piece of kind of justification and answering Barry in a non-confrontational way, in kind of just a very simple way. They say, investigators look at evidence and statements, and they consider people's biases versus the lack of bias from evidentiary items like cell phones and telematics. That's kind of a kind way of saying you may have a bit of a subjective view that's actually wrong, or I don't think they want to say dishonest, but they're basically saying your subjective view may be biased, but the view of a text that is time-stamped and telematics is absolutely that is absolutely undisputable, right? It's incontrovertible, so it's not biased. So how do you account for that? And then he goes on to say, when things don't add up, investigators consider the bias component and they most likely side with the evidence, which seems like a very kind way, a very nice way to say to Barry, we're going to kind of side with the evidence on a couple of things. It seems like, I mean, am I being unfair to say, it seems like at this point, it's very late, 99 of page 129, very late, very far into the affidavit, it seems like they're saying, we are going to side with the evidence because of this bias component. They're not saying, Barry, we don't believe you. But what they're kind of saying is, Barry, we've heard what you've said, but we're kind of going to go to evidence that's not biased. I hope you don't mind, right? Does that make sense? I mean, is that a reasonable thing to take out of this? So Special Agent Grissing told Timmy, can I put you down? You're like writhing around. Can I put you on the ground? Okay. Special Agent Grissing told Barry that investigators want the truth from him, even if it does not look good for him. And that's quite a strong statement right there. They're kind of saying, and bear in mind where we are, it's like interview number 14 or 15. It's 11 months later, and they're saying, Barry, we want the truth from you. 11 months later. By saying that, I don't know whether I'm being unfair, but if you say to someone after talking to them 15 times really about the same thing, and you say, we want the truth from you, doesn't that mean we don't really feel that what you've told us before this has been completely reliable? Is that fair to say? Also, would you need to talk to someone 15 times if the version I gave you right in the beginning was complete, comprehensive, credible, and you felt like it was it answered all your questions? So, them saying, first of all, Barry, we want the truth from you, seems to be saying, well, have we been getting the truth from you? Have we been getting the truth from you? I mean, why would you need to say that? I mean, law enforcement saying, we want the truth from you. And this is 11 months later. And then also saying, even if it doesn't look good for you. So that seems to be saying, we want the truth from you, and we kind of anticipating it's not going to be a good look. We kind of have the sense that this might not reflect very well on you. Even so, it's quite a gentle way of saying this to him. It's quite a gentle way of saying, can you tell us this again? Can you be a bit more forthcoming? They're not saying, we think you're guilty and we're going to arrest you. They're just saying, we are feeling that the metadata, the telematics and so on is, they're siding with that. Can you kind of help us reconcile what you're saying with this other evidence that we feel is kind of reliable, right? And it's quite funny how this is in the third person. You're not getting verbatim everywhere, but every now and then they decide whether they are going to quote Barry. And so they actually quote Barry responding to this thing of, we want the truth from you, and even if it doesn't look good. How does Barry respond? He says, and it's like written MHH. So I guess he's going, Barry, we want the truth from you, and even if it doesn't look good. Does that inspire confidence? Barry, can we get the truth from you? Now, so Barry, can you tell us what really happened? So they kind of put MHH for and in brackets that means affirmative. So Barry doesn't actually say yes. He doesn't say yes, I will tell you the truth, and then tell them the truth. He just kind of gives this And I think he a couple of times. So it's quite important to look at where he says It's a kind of idiosyncratic thing. So Barry was told that he, like many in his position in similar investigations, is hesitant to talk about Saturday afternoon because he thinks agents would rush to judgment and say he did this. Now, it's quite ironic that that is exactly what came out in the media, that there's a rush to judgment arresting Barry when he was arrested like almost a year to the day. Oh no, jeepers, sort of rush to judgment. You should have waited longer. If you ask me, it was an extremely patient investigation. So anyway, so they're saying, Barry, we're not going to rush to judgment. And that we're also not going to say you did this. Just tell us more. They're kind of trying to prod Barry. They're trying to get him to come out of his Special Agent Grissing said Suzanne's phone was either taken or shut off, not under her control on Saturday. So now they're kind of starting to bring out the big guns, and we're now almost at the 1/3 mark of the 30-page last statement, right? Now they're starting to hit the kind of the big wickets. They want to talk about Suzanne's phone, and they've got this serious question, which I think they've had since the beginning. Her phone was either taken, somebody took her phone, or just shut off, which means that her phone wasn't under her control. And that implies something that's not innocent. That implies foul play. That implies she didn't go mountain biking with her phone and something. Her phone was taken or it was shut off. Barry, what do you think about that? What do you think, Barry? Do you think her phone was taken or do you think someone turned it off? Barry, what do you think? Barry said, well, that didn't happen. I didn't take her phone that day. So that's how Barry responds. Right? And I seem to remember, I wish I could show it to you now, but I seem to remember Barry saying somewhere, I don't know whether it was a misstatement, I don't know whether he was misquoted, but Barry said something like, I have her phone. I think what he meant to say was something like, I've had her phone or I've looked at her phone. But I think in terms of the, you guys have got the affidavit with you. Can you find the part? I don't know if you can search in it. I would guess that you can't. But some of these PDFs you can search where Barry says, I think I have her phone. And then he, I think, spoke about, and then I think he sort of, I don't know if he walked that back, but he said something like, I wish I could give you the page number, but he said something like, I've got her passwords and something about the iCloud. Anyway, here he's saying that didn't happen. I didn't take her phone that day. I didn't know she was communicating with somebody, but we did discuss having a good evening together and turning phones off. And maybe I put mine in airplane mode instead of turning mine. I don't remember what I did. So that's quite an interesting response there. So he's asked, what happened to Suzanne's phone? What happened to Suzanne's phone that afternoon? And Barry says, I didn't take her phone that day. I didn't know she was communicating with somebody. And I think that's where there are kind of questions. Did he take her phone? It's also quite interesting how he seems to misspeak. It seems like he was going to say, I didn't take her home that day. I didn't take her home that day. But he changes it to, I didn't take her phone that day. I didn't know. And if you think about, look, I don't know whether that is what he's going to say, like you've got to listen to the audio. But if he did mean to say, I didn't take her home that day, think about the scenario kind of with Chris Watts as well. When Chris Watts killed Shanann, what he was expecting to happen was to take her home that day. I think the same thing kind of happened with Scott Peterson, that he anticipated that he would take, on the day that she died, he would take her home and her car and everything else. And so it's interesting that he says, I didn't take her. It seems like he's going to say, because it's H-O and it's phone, H-O, it's almost like hone, take her home that day. And then he corrects himself, phone that day. I didn't take her phone that day. I didn't know she was communicating with somebody, didn't he? Didn't he know that she was communicating? Because she was. And she was communicating especially a lot then. So was there really no surveillance that day of all days? And he says, I didn't know that. I didn't do that, whatever. We did discuss having a good evening together and then turning our phones off. So their daughters are both away and both of them then turn their phones off. Immediately, it's kind of like immediately after she sends all these selfies and there's all of this activity with Jeff Libler, both of them decide to turn their phones off and have a good evening together. I just want to look at some of your comments. Karina says he offers likely scenarios. Okay, I'm going to... Vicky says accountability matters. Terry Dean says, would love to hear the interviews with the girls. Okay. Okay, so we almost finished, probably two odd pages left to go. It's quite interesting that he says he put his phone in airplane mode, and then he says, I don't remember what I did. So he starts off his statement pretty adamant. Well, that didn't happen. I didn't take her phone that day. I didn't know she was communicating, whatever. And then at the end of that paragraph, he starts qualifying. He says, maybe I put mine in airplane mode. I don't remember what I did. So it starts off pretty adamant and pretty certain, and then it becomes pretty flaky. Special Agent Grussing said Barry took his phone out of airplane mode at 10:17 p.m. This is, to me, one of the craziest parts of this statement, this particular part. So, yeah, Special Agent Grussing is actually letting Barry know how much they know in terms of the metadata, how much they know about what's going on these phones. And so he says, Barry, you took your phone out of airplane mode at 10:17 p.m. And now Barry's earlier said, we did discuss having a good evening together and turning our phones off. Then he said, maybe I put my phone in airplane mode. I don't remember. Right? Now you'd think if the whole idea was to have a good evening together, that you would have your phone off kind of the whole evening. Not that you turn it kind of back on at 10:17 p.m., especially if you're going to kind of make love and whatnot. If the idea is turn the phone off so we can be romantic and whatever, then why would you turn your phone back on? Unless you say 10:17 is not, or 10:17 is very late at night. Barry asked, and it's quite interesting, Barry asked that night. So Barry's like, wow, you know that I took my phone out of airplane mode at 10:17 that night. And Special Agent Grussing confirms that night. It's kind of quite a blunt retort. Barry said, or she did. Now he's saying, I didn't take it out of airplane mode, maybe Suzanne did. So anywhere where he kind of gets into trouble, or where it's a bit of a iffy scenario, then Suzanne did it. Then he's got nothing to explain, Suzanne did it. And so Special Agent Grussing kind of does a double take. He says, she brought your phone out of airplane mode that night. Barry says, yeah. Can you think of a single, I'm talking about you, not you to me. Can you think of a single time someone has ever taken your phone out of airplane mode? I can't. And maybe I'm unusual in that respect, but I can't remember anyone ever putting my phone in airplane mode or taking it out of airplane mode. Can you remember? Let's do a quick poll. Is there anyone that has had somebody else put their phone in airplane mode to take it out? So far we've got Nisi, never. Robbie, no. Jean Carris, never. Terry Dean, never. Two Dog Night, no. Hafran Maria, no. Yvonne Phillips, nope. Danielle says something else. Margaret Zabinski, no. Miss Liverbird, never. Vanessa Jansen, never. Heather G, no. Leah Sampson, no. Bria Lace, never. I haven't seen a single person here saying yes. Karen R, never. Lee, no. Is there anyone that lets someone put their phone in airplane mode or ask someone to do it? I've definitely never ever had that happen. Hafran says not even my kids. So I think that's just really quite interesting. And so no wonder the agent kind of does a double take. Barry says, or she did, meaning she took it out of airplane mode. Grissing asks, she brought yours out of airplane mode, question mark. Barry says, yeah. Special Agent Grissing said that would be odd because Suzanne's phone had no activity. And that's a really good point. He's saying, is taking Barry, he's not really kind of ridiculing him, but he's kind of taking what he's saying at face value and saying, why would Suzanne take your phone out of airplane mode but not her own, and then her phone never does anything since then? So she brings your phone online, but she never brings her phone back online. It's quite a strong point. And I think if the prosecution are savvy, this is one of the biggest points that they could possibly make, almost as a what's the word, as a final flourish, because it just is so unlikely. I suppose you could say that Barry's like, well, I don't know, I didn't do it, maybe she did. That's not a big deal. But just to even throw it out there just seems to me to be ridiculous, ludicrous. So I think the prosecution could possibly make a meal out of this particular, it feels a bit like a fail. I don't think anyone would offer something like this just because it's so far from the realm of possibility. Or am I wrong? I mean, maybe there is someone here that has done it. Heather writes, oopsie. Boz says, I've never put my phone in airplane mode unless I'm actually on an airplane. I actually put my phone in airplane mode often. Kerry Heflin, good to see you here. Okay. Natasha. Okay. Sunflower says, I've never had a reason to turn off my phones or turn off my cameras. Okay. Good to see you, Brianna. Okay, so we had 2 hours, 7 minutes. I don't really want to go too much beyond 2.5 hours. We already, well, it's midnight. I need to sign off and go to bed. So I'm going to do 2 more pages. So this is quite a big moment. Grissing says, she brought yours out of airplane mode. Barry says, yeah. Special Agent Grissing said, that would be odd because Suzanne's phone had no activity. Barry said, yeah, I don't recall taking it out of airplane mode. Barry stood up and walked towards a cell phone that was charging. The phone rang about 5 minutes previously. He said, let's make sure that's not my work calling. So it seems like Barry almost interrupts this moment by kind of just getting up and sorting out a phone. It seems like he leaves the table to do something that maybe isn't even necessary. It's quite interesting. I mean, it's quite interesting that they note that as well. Now, discussion of Exhibit 34. Special Agent Grissing turned to communication between Suzanne and her lover. I think they refer to him as Fred, so his real name is Jeff Libler. At this point, Barry ostensibly, apparently, officially doesn't know who he is. So Barry was shown the photo of Suzanne dated April 14, 2020, and asked if he thought she looked high. He said, yeah. Special Agent Grissing clarified, she looks intoxicated to you? Barry said, yes. Do you mind if I read? And then there are quite a few images here. Shall I just turn it around so you can see? And Barry asked, is this him or her? Agents explained the messages and photos were Suzanne's sides of the texting to her lover. After reading a few pages, Barry said, yeah, she looks intoxicated on every picture I've seen so far. Okay. Special Agent Grissing pointed to a photo of Suzanne wearing a red T-shirt on April 18th, so that was 2 days before that. Oh no, sorry, 4 days after that. So the one was April 14th, then April 18th. And asked that one, Barry said, yep. After continuing to read through the text, Barry said, she's saying she's wearing question mark. He was referencing the 04/21/2020 photo of Suzanne wearing a yellow and white shirt with the text, thanks baby, I wear it for you. Barry stopped reading, sat down, and agents asked if he had any thoughts. He said, that's pretty hurtful. And then that's it. Then there's a discussion of Exhibit 5. Barry was shown a photo of papers for the Broomfield wall. This is really quite interesting. And Special Agent Harris explained the photo was from a bathroom drawer. Barry said, yeah, that's probably my side of the bathroom. Now, as far as I understand this, it's a photo from the bathroom drawer inside the Puma Path home. It's not, unless it's a photo from the drawer in the bathroom in Broomfield. So it's papers dealing with the Broomfield wall, and guess where they are? They're in the bathroom drawer. Now, why are they in the bathroom? Shouldn't they be in the truck, or shouldn't he have been using these papers for the Broomfield wall? Remember, he took papers with him. Why? What are they doing in the bathroom drawer? Barry said, yeah, that's probably my side of the bathroom. That does sound like it's in the Puma Path home, because my side of the bathroom would be in his home, right? Special Agent Grissing asked if he came back from the site and put those in the drawer. It's quite a good question. So did you go to Broomfield and then you came back from there and you put those important papers dealing with this important big job in the drawer? Why would you put them in the bathroom drawer and not anywhere else, really? And I think the question is also, did he put them in the drawer before he left, or did he put them in the drawer after he came back? Barry said, I had different copies. He added, that was the original copy they gave me, like when we first was looking at the job. And so I kind of put a big question mark there. Why on earth would you put the original copy in a bathroom drawer? Why wouldn't you put the original copy, I don't know if it's a contract or whatever, why wouldn't you put that in a proper place, like an office drawer or the safe or somewhere? What's it doing in a bathroom drawer? It seems like an odd place. So Barry does say, well, there were copies, but the original is in the bathroom drawer. Now they go into discussion of Exhibit 6. Special Agent Grissing showed Barry a photo of a .22 round in his bedroom. I've seen it as well, and I would have also asked him. I would have said, Barry, what is going on here? How do you think Barry responds? What's this .22 round doing in the bedroom, in your bedroom? And so Grissing asks if he knew where it was from, and this is how Barry responds. He says, no, I don't. Again, there's that kind of mumbly response. No, I don't. He guessed it came from his pocket when Suzanne was folding laundry. So once again, if there's a bit of a difficult thing, well, Suzanne did it. It couldn't have been me taking off my trousers or whatever. Suzanne was folding the laundry and that's when it fell out. I put a big orange squiggle under that, because if Suzanne wasn't folding laundry, then what did happen? In other words, if we say we don't believe that, or that seems unlikely, then what really did happen? Timmy, you're so hyperactive. Okay, so that's the end of page 100. Timmy, I'll be with you soon, okay? Special Agent Grissing showed Barry a photo of damage to the door frame of their bedroom. I would also want to know about that. Explaining the prior owners said that it was not there previously, and I put a big orange question mark next to that. Barry was asked if that was the result of an argument or him being locked out. Seemed to be fairly straightforward assumptions there. Barry said, I have no idea what that's from. It's kind of a strange answer. Like, imagine someone comes to your house and there's a big, I can tell you, I think it was today, I've got a garage door, a garage, it's not the garage door that goes down, it's a door to the back of the garage, but it's exposed kind of to the elements, and that door swells when it rains, and the door is always needing to be sort of stuffed into its frame, and with the result that it doesn't close completely, it sort of jams into the frame, and when you pull it out, you've got to jerk it quite hard for it to open. And I think it was today, it was either today or yesterday, when I pulled on the door handle just snapped, because it was jammed in so far that there was this tension, right? And so there's no way, if someone asked me, how did that happen, that I would say, I have no idea what that's from, right? Unless somebody else did that. But how would you not know in your own home how certain damage is made? And now this is to your own bedroom door. She says, I have no idea what that's from. It's not a great answer. It's not really a really good answer. It raises more questions than it answers. When asked if he knew it was there, Barry replied no. So Barry's saying, I didn't know that I think it's a crack in the door frame. He's saying he just didn't know it was there. Special Agent Grissing showed Barry a page showing friend requests on Suzanne's Facebook on Friday, May 8th, and asked him if he was responsible. That's quite an on-the-chin question. That's quite on the chin. So Barry's kind of been saying, I've got no idea about that, and then I'm not sure what's going on there. And Barry answers, no, I never did anything on her Facebook. Now, once again, this is bringing up this question of, did Barry interfere with her phone? Where he says, she took my phone out of airplane mode, that seems to be acknowledging that there's mutual interference with one another's devices, that it's kind of ordinary. And so now the question comes up, were you responsible for Suzanne suddenly getting these friend requests? I think she made friend requests to a number of men on Friday, May 8th. So is Barry responsible for that? He says, no, I never did anything on her Facebook. Special Agent Grissing said by this date in May, Suzanne had the text fight with him and they were accusing each other of having lovers. So the agent hears Barry's response and he kind of provides some context. Barry is asked if he was sending the request to see if she had a boyfriend. So it seems like the agents either don't believe him or suspect that he was playing around with her Facebook. Then he said, absolutely 100% no. Now, like I've said, Barry can be absolutely adamant in some of his answers, and then it's very messy and uncertain in others. Now he's absolutely certain that he didn't do this. And he doesn't just say no, it's absolutely 100% no. No, I absolutely did not. I never went into her phone, into her Facebook ever. The only time I touched her phone was in Mexico. So he starts off by saying, I never went into her phone. And then he says, the only time I touched a phone was in Mexico. So he's saying, I never touched a phone ever, but I did touch a phone in Mexico. And then he said, he did that when I thought she was secretly doing something. I think I told you that story. And she said, here, and gave me, and you can look. And she gave it to me and let me look because there's no way I could find out what you guys found. He's saying, there's no way I could find out what you guys found. Meaning, there's no way I could find out the stuff you know about Suzanne. There's no way I could do that if I try to look on her phone. Barry continued, and I went to Snapchat and I looked through all of her Snapchat people and I looked through all of her text people and I didn't see anything and I gave it back to her. So if you think about what he's saying is, he's just been asked, Barry, did you go onto Suzanne's Facebook and did you send all of these requests on basically the night before she was possibly killed or whatever happened? And Barry's saying, no, I never touched her phone, but I did go onto her Snapchat and I looked through all of her Snapchat people and I looked through all of her text people. So he's kind of flatly denying it very strongly. Absolutely 100% no. No, I absolutely did not. I never went into her phone, in her Facebook ever. Then he says, well, I did go into her Snapchat and I looked through all of her Snapchat people and I looked through all of her text people. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry about Suzanne's list. Now he goes back to chased me around the resort and threatened. And then another one, quote, took phone, if those occurred at the same time. So Suzanne's actually written down part of a grievance list, the words took phone, which could mean anything, but it could also mean Barry took my phone. I don't think it means I took his phone. I mean, these are grievances against Barry. What do you think took phone means? And now they're asking, did him chasing her around the resort and threatening her coincide with took phone? Did this happen at the same time? Barry said, yeah, that's I don't remember chasing her, but I maybe walked behind her. I wouldn't chase through a resort, but I was wanting her phone and that's when I got it. So this is obviously important enough to actually mention on page 101. And so they're mentioning it verbatim. I'll read it again. So he's asked, did it happen at the same time, threatening her and taking her phone? Barry said, yeah, that's this, and it seems like meaning the same. Then he says, I don't remember chasing her, but I maybe walked behind her. I wouldn't chase through a resort, but I was wanting her phone, and that's when I got it. Special Agent Grussing returned to the Bobby Huff and Facebook requests, confirming it was not Barry, and he said, no, absolutely not. So they asked him again about that. Barry continued. So now Barry's really emphasizing, justifying himself. He says, if you look at my Facebook account, you'll see that I've never communicated with anybody, maybe a high school friend here and there, but never any of these women I don't know, never had communication. And, she was bothered by that. And I said, if you want me to cancel it, I'll just cancel it. And I ended up just canceling it, and it wasn't worth me having to fight my wife about it. And we've talked about Facebook before because we had a friend's marriage blow apart because of a Facebook contact with an old boyfriend. And I said, I just don't think it's good for us to even have it. So obviously, look what happened. Barry continued, she had it, contacted somebody, and here it is. And now we come to the last page we're going to deal with. So this is going to be part 1, and I think there'll be 3 parts to this. In the next part, we'll do the next 10 pages. In the last part, the last 10. So I think you'll agree with me. There's some fireworks in this part. I think there are even more in the next part. Page 102, Special Agent Harris asked Barry if he had any thoughts now on why she did those friend requests. Barry said, because she would probably know that I would get upset if she would friend men. And she's probably, from everything we've talked about, in a state of mind where she just don't care anymore about what I think. Special Agent Grussing asked if Suzanne would know Barry would see it, and he said probably not. Excellent point now. Special Agent Grissom questioned why she would do it to upset Barry if she did not think he would see it. So Barry's making the case that she's doing this to spite him, she's doing this to upset him, but there's no way he can even see it, apparently, according to him. There's something else I meant to mention here. So don't you find it interesting? I don't know what the definite facts are here, but I'm presuming that Barry deleted his Facebook account. And if you think about it, that happens quite often in high-profile true crime cases. Chris Watts deleted his Facebook, and there's so little that we found from Chris Watts' accounts, like his Twitter's gone as well, and I don't know if he even had an Instagram, but it's quite interesting how social media disappears. And I don't know exactly, did Barry cancel his Facebook account? Does he have an account now? It just would be interesting to know. Then this is the last part of the walkthrough that we're going to do. It's midway through page 102. Special Agent Grissom, so Special Agent Grissom questioned why she would do it to upset Barry if she did not think he would see it. Barry said, I think she knew, I just didn't touch her phone. I mean, maybe she thought I did, but kind of a nowhere, kind of a nonsensical answer that. Special Agent Grissom said, it seemed like she set a trap for Barry. And he said, I mean, it sounds like that to me. In other words, Grissom is saying, if Suzanne did this, she sent all these friend requests to men and Barry didn't do that, then was she setting a trap for Barry? And Barry says, it sounds like it. And then he says, I don't think she did it I don't know why she did it, but I don't think that she would think that I'm going to look at her Facebook account because I just don't do it. I just don't do it. And if you look at what we've been dealing with, there's been a lot of looking at one another's phone, looking at Snapchat. A lot of this seems to be dealing with possible surveillance, the VPN and so on. Special Agent Grissom said Barry told agents prior that their phones were tied together through Apple and he had the main. Barry interjected, yeah, but she changed hers. She got her own private, and obviously now I see why she did it for this boy. Barry added, but yeah, she had her own Apple ID and password and stuff I knew nothing about. Special Agent Grissom asked Barry if he knew by now. This is such a great point. Do you know by now who Suzanne's lover was? And he said, no, I'm still in the dark about that. And what's quite interesting is, does he ever ask, does he kind of take his own initiative and say, guys, you're talking to me for the third time, but there's something I've got to know. Who is this guy? Can you show me a photo of him? What's his name? You want to know about him, and yet Barry doesn't seem very curious about him. Why do you think that is? Do you think Barry's not a curious person? Also, if it's true that Barry has been spying on Suzanne, don't you think the most important thing he would want to know is who is this guy? So why does it seem like he doesn't seem curious about it? Or is he curious about it, he's just given up? If Barry did send those friend requests, do you think that Barry knew Jeff Libler's identity at some point, either before what happened or after, or even at this point now in the interview? Do you think Barry already knew Jeff Libler was? But why does Barry not ask who this guy is? So I think it is quite interesting that they ask him. They're certainly curious about it. So law enforcement asked him, Barry, do you know by now who Suzanne's lover is? And he says, no, I'm still in the dark about that. Special Agent Grissing asked if he cared at this point. So it does seem a bit odd. Don't you want to know who it is? Aren't you curious? And he says, well, I want to know. I'm afraid of doing something I'd regret. But I would not kill the guy, but I would see him, I would probably hit him pretty hard in the nose. Then I'm going to end off with this last sentence. Redacted came home and Barry asked to continue the interview at the fire station. That, I think, is part 2 of this interview on April 5th. And that brings us to the 2.5-hour mark. Kelly Heflin says she wonders whether the prosecution team may be able to pull off a circumstantial case. Natasha Richardson says, I think he may have had access to her account. Vanessa Jansen says, sorry, can't stay. Enjoy the analysis, everyone. Okay, cheers, Vanessa. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here, so don't blame me. I think Vanessa's in South Africa. Someone says that she thinks Barry's pretending that he doesn't know it's Jeff, that Barry knows who it is. I wonder whether he does. Robbie Robbins says, thank you. It is really interesting. Heather G is blaming Libla, but he doesn't care who he was. Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. I think we were at about 200 in chat for a while, which is quite weird because when we have members only, it's usually only about 50. So it's quite nice having a few of you here. I find it a little bit daunting because I'm trying to sort of be sensitive to what you're saying, but also concentrate on my script. But thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks for all these super chats. Always welcome, definitely. Thank you very much to the mods that are here. Stephanie, Jean, Karis, I think Bria is also still here. Thanks, guys, for running a tight ship. Thanks also to all the members who have been, regularly tuning in. So thanks to you guys. And it's also really good to get the input from the subscribers that we've gotten to know and love. We see you guys so often, and we miss you when you do the members only. Julie, thanks a lot for that. Thank you. Stephanie says, I'll be rewatching. Okay, guys, RTCRM Creative says thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. I've really got to get some shut-eye. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.